I never thought I'd see my father cry. He was always the epitome of corporate strength, the man who built Morrison Industries from the ground up. But there he sat in his expensive leather chair, shoulders shaking as he held the foreclosure notice. "We're ruined," he whispered, his voice cracking. 30 years of work, gone. My mother paced the study, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors. "How could this happen, James? How could you let those investors take everything?" I stood in the doorway, calculator in hand, going through the numbers again. The situation was dire. $200,000 in immediate debt, the company hemorrhaging money, and aggressive investors circling like vultures. One wrong move and Morrison Industries would collapse, taking my family's legacy with it. "I can help," I said quietly. They both turned to look at me as if just remembering I was there. My father's eyes narrowed. "This isn't the time for jokes, Madeline. This is serious business." Of course. In their eyes, I was still the family disappointment. The daughter who'd walked away from the family business 5 years ago to start my own consulting firm. While my younger brother Michael had followed in Dad's footsteps, becoming Morrison Industries' golden boy, I'd chosen my own path. "I have the money," I continued, pulling up my banking app. "I can clear the debt today." My mother laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. What could you possibly have saved from your little consulting business?" I bit back a retort. They had no idea that my little consulting business had grown into one of the most successful private equity firms in the city. I operated through holding companies and subsidiaries, keeping my name out of the spotlight. To them, I was still just their headstrong daughter who'd made the foolish choice to leave the family empire. "I've done well," I said simply. "Let me help." My father stood up, his 6 feet 2 inches frame towering over my 5 feet 4 inches. "Done well. You work out of a tiny office downtown. Meanwhile, your brother is currently in Aspen skiing while the company collapses?" I finished for him. "Michael is networking with important clients." I pulled up my bank account and held out my phone. Both my parents fell silent as they saw the balance. My mother's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. That's impossible," she whispered. "I can transfer the money right now," I said. "No loans, no interest, no strings attached. Just let me help save the company." My father's pride warred with desperation on his face. The foreclosure notice crumpled in his grip as he thought about it. Finally, he gave a sharp nod. "Fine. But this doesn't change anything. Once we're back on our feet." "I know," I cut him off. "I'm still the disappointment. I'm still not part of the real business world. Just give me the account details." Within an hour, I had transferred $200,000 to Morrison Industries' business account. I also quietly purchased several key contracts through one of my shell companies, ensuring they'd have stable income for the next few months. Not that they needed to know about that part. My mother touched my arm as I prepared to leave. "Madeline, thank you. But please don't mention this to anyone. We don't want people thinking we needed charity." That word, charity, hit like a slap. 5 years of building my own empire, of making decisions that affected billion-dollar companies, reduced to charity in their eyes. "Of course not," I smiled tightly. "Heaven forbid anyone know your failure of a daughter helped save the family business." I drove home to my penthouse apartment, the one my parents had never seen because they always insisted on meeting at their house in the expensive part of town. The irony didn't escape me. My small consulting firm had just saved their precious company, and they were still ashamed of me. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Morrison Industries stabilized, thanks not only to my money but also to the contracts I'd quietly arranged. My father's confidence returned, and soon he was back to his usual boasting about Michael's latest achievements. Then came the dinner that changed everything. "We have wonderful news," my mother announced over expertly cooked salmon. "Michael's coming home next week. He's got big plans for modernizing the company." I pushed my food around my plate. "Really? And what exactly are his plans?" "Well," my father beamed, "he's been talking to some very influential people in Aspen. They're interested in new investment opportunities. Michael thinks we should restructure, maybe sell off some divisions." My fork clattered against my plate. "Sell off divisions? Dad, those contracts are what's keeping the company afloat right now. What would you know about it?" Michael had walked in, still in his designer ski wear, looking tanned and relaxed. Been playing businesswoman in your little office while I've been making real connections? He hadn't even been home when the company was collapsing. Hadn't answered his phone when Dad tried to reach him. But here he was, ready to dismantle everything I'd just saved. Michael, darling. Mom rushed to hug him. We didn't expect you until next week. Thought I'd surprise everyone. He dropped into the chair next to mine, smirking. So, sis, how's the small business life? Still giving advice to mom and pop shops? I thought about the major merger I'd orchestrated that morning, the billion-dollar deals waiting for my signature. It pays the bills. Speaking of paying bills, Michael turned to Dad. We need to talk about my ideas for the company. I've met some people who are very interested in acquiring our main divisions. Could be very profitable for us. You mean the divisions that are finally turning a profit again? I couldn't help asking. The ones with solid contracts for the next 3 years? Michael's eyes narrowed. Since when do you know anything about our contracts? That's enough, my father interrupted. Madeline, you gave up the right to comment on company business when you walked away 5 years ago. Michael understands the real corporate world. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The real corporate world? You mean the one where you nearly lost everything last month? The one where you needed my charity to survive? The room went deadly quiet. Michael looked between us, confusion evident on his face. What is she talking about? Nothing, my mother said quickly. Madeline's just being dramatic. She helped with a small cash flow issue, that's all. Small. I laughed. $200,000 is small now? Michael's face turned red. You took money from her? From my sister who can barely run a consulting business. Get out. My father's voice was cold. Get out of this house right now. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious? We don't need your charity or your opinions, he shouted, standing up so suddenly his chair toppled over. Get out. And don't come back until you learn your place. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Michael just smirked, already pulling out papers to show Dad his brilliant plans for dismantling the company I'd just saved. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. You know what's funny? You're so convinced I'm a failure, you never bothered to check who's been buying up Morrison Industries stock for the past 3 years. Or who really owns those new contracts keeping you afloat. What are you talking about? Michael demanded. I smiled, reaching for the doorknob. I guess you'll find out at next week's board meeting. I hear there are some interesting changes coming to the company leadership. We don't want you at the board meeting, my father shouted after me. We don't want your money. We don't want anything from you. Too late, I said softly, closing the door behind me. The week before the board meeting passed in a flurry of texts and calls from my family, first angry, then pleading, then threatening. I ignored them all, focusing instead on finalizing my plans. Everything's ready, my assistant Emma confirmed, handing me the latest stock reports. We now control 51% of Morrison Industries through various subsidiaries. The board members have all been notified of the emergency meeting. I studied the numbers, thinking of my father's face when he'd thrown me out. Any response from the family? Your brother's been calling every investor he met in Aspen, trying to gather support. No luck. Emma smiled. Turns out ski resort connections aren't as valuable as he thought. The morning of the board meeting, I dressed carefully in a Chanel suit I'd never worn to family dinners. They'd only ever seen me in casual clothes, playing down my success to avoid their questions. Today that would change. I arrived early, watching through the one-way glass as the board members filed in. Most were old friends of my father's, men who'd patted me on the head as a child and later dismissed me as a foolish girl playing at business. My father arrived with Michael, both looking confident despite the emergency meeting notice. My mother slipped in behind them, though she wasn't on the board. Probably expecting to celebrate Michael's brilliant plans for the company. At exactly 9 a.m., Emma opened the conference room door. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Phoenix Capital Partners and majority shareholder of Morrison Industries, Ms. Madeline Morrison. The silence was absolute as I walked in. My father's face went white. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. My mother gripped the back of a chair for support. Good morning, I said calmly, taking my place at the head of the table. Let's begin by discussing the recent attempt to sell off our most profitable divisions. This is ridiculous. Michael jumped up. You can't be the majority shareholder. That's impossible. I nodded to Emma, who began distributing folders. As you can see, Phoenix Capital Partners, through various subsidiaries, has been acquiring Morrison Industries stock for the past 3 years. We now own 51% of the company. Phoenix Capital. My father whispered, recognition dawning. Everyone in the business world knew Phoenix Capital. We were behind some of the biggest corporate turnarounds of the decade. That's your company. The same little consulting firm you've been mocking for years, I confirmed. Though we do a bit more than advise mom-and-pop shops. One of the board members, Mr. Richardson, cleared his throat. Ms. Morrison, your track record at Phoenix Capital is impressive, but surely you understand this is a family company. Oh, I understand family very well, I interrupted, my voice sharp. I understand watching this family nearly destroy itself through pride and poor management. I understand having to secretly buy up contracts to keep the company afloat while my brother was skiing in Aspen. Michael's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. Those contracts were my connections. Those contracts, I said quietly, were arranged by my firm using my relationships while you were taking selfies on the slopes. My father finally found his voice. Why didn't you tell us? All these years. Would you have believed me? I asked. When have you ever believed in anything I've done? The room fell silent again. In that silence, I opened my laptop and pulled up the company's financials. Now, let's discuss the actual state of Morrison Industries. Thanks to the contracts we arranged, the company is stable for the first time in years. However, significant changes are needed. You can't just take over. Michael shouted. Dad, do something. Our father sat there looking older than I'd ever seen him. She owns 51%, Michael. She can do whatever she wants. As I was saying, I continued, changes are needed. First, the current management team will be restructured. Mr. Richardson, your retirement package is in the blue folder. Mr. Wilson, yours is in the red one. The old men who dismissed me for years now couldn't meet my eyes as they opened their golden parachutes. Dad, I turned to my father, you'll be moved to an advisory position. Your experience is valuable, but it's time for new leadership. He nodded slowly, decades of pride finally crumbling. And Michael? I looked at my brother, who was still standing, fists clenched. Michael's position has been eliminated, effective immediately. You can't fire me, he yelled. I'm your brother. Yes, you remind me of that every time you need something. But when was the last time you acted like a brother? When was the last time any of you acted like family? My mother, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Madeline, please. We can work this out as a family. Like we worked it out when you threw me out after I paid your debts? Or like we worked it out all those years you were ashamed of my little consulting business? She flinched. The time for family discussions is over, I said firmly. This is business. And in business, results matter more than blood ties. The meeting continued for another hour. I outlined my plans for the company, real plans, based on market research and solid business principles, not connections made on ski slopes. By the end, even the remaining board members were nodding in agreement. As everyone filed out, my father lingered behind. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. All these years, he said quietly, I thought you'd failed. But you were building something bigger than I ever managed. I learned from watching you, I replied. I learned what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. The money last month. You could have taken over then. Why help us instead? I gathered my papers, thinking carefully before answering. Because despite everything, you're my father. I wanted to give you one last chance to see me as something other than a disappointment. And now I'm your boss. I suggest you take the weekend to clear out your office. Emma will help you set up in the advisory suite on Monday. He nodded, shoulders slumped, and walked out. Through the glass walls, I watched him join my mother and Michael in the lobby. They looked small somehow, their designer clothes and proud bearing no longer enough to fill the space they occupied. Emma brought me coffee as I sat down in what had been my father's chair. Congratulations, boss. Though I have to ask, why reveal yourself now? Why not stay in the shadows? I smiled, running my hand along the smooth wood of the desk where I'd once watched my father sign the documents that shaped our family's destiny. Because sometimes success isn't enough. Sometimes you need to stand in the light and show everyone who underestimated you exactly what they failed to see. Over the next few months, Morrison Industries transformed. Under my leadership, we expanded into new markets, modernized our operations and doubled our profit margins. The same board members who'd once dismissed me now hung on my every word. Michael eventually took a mid-level position at a competitor's firm, though I heard he rarely mentioned his connection to Morrison Industries anymore. My father adapted surprisingly well to his advisory role, perhaps finally understanding that his daughter had surpassed his greatest achievements. My mother still hosted family dinners, still tried to maintain the appearance of perfect family unity. I attended occasionally, more out of curiosity than obligation. It was interesting to watch them adapt to the new reality, one where their greatest disappointment had become their superior. "Madeline," my mother said at one such dinner, "I've been thinking about your little office downtown. Perhaps it's time you moved Phoenix Capital's headquarters to a more prestigious location." I sipped my wine, enjoying the moment. "Oh, I don't work from that office anymore. That was just for show, to maintain my cover while I was buying up Morrison Industries stock. Phoenix Capital's headquarters takes up the top 10 floors of the Crystal Tower downtown. The Crystal Tower, the most expensive commercial real estate in the city." My mother nearly choked on her wine. But that's the building where Dad always wanted to move Morrison Industries, but could never afford? Yes, I know. Phoenix Capital bought it last year. In fact, we own most of the prime commercial real estate downtown. Michael, who'd been pushed by our mother to attend these dinners, turned pale. His new office was in a building I apparently owned. "Don't worry about your lease," I told him kindly. "I'm not that petty. Besides, your rent helps pay for my new yacht." The silence that followed was worth every minute of the past 5 years. Worth every dismissive comment, every condescending pat on the head, every proud announcement about Michael's latest accomplishment while my own achievements were ignored. Because success, I've learned, isn't just about making money or gaining power. Sometimes it's about standing in your father's office, sitting in his chair, and knowing that you've built something he never could. Sometimes it's about watching your arrogant brother realize that his entire future depends on your goodwill. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about smiling at your mother across a dinner table and declining her suggestion to move your office, knowing that you own the very ground beneath her feet. They wanted me to learn my place. I did. It just wasn't the place they had in mind.